Okay, can you hear me, Mrs. Simmons? Yes, wonderful. So I'm live. We're live for our 4th parent and carer session. And I'm assuming that probably people who are here have been here before. Just to remind you that you can drop me some questions. There's a question mark bubble at the top of your screen, and you can write questions or comments or whatever you want, really. I can see those, and I can maybe feed them into the work that Mrs. Simmons is doing, or we can take them away and we can think about how we're going to build it into next week's session. The last session is next week, and that's just going to be an opportunity for us just to revisit anything that's come up, particularly questions that maybe haven't been answered or stuff that you want us to talk a little bit more about to reflect on what's happened over these weeks. So I'm now going to pass you on to Mrs. Simmons, who's going to lead today's session as always with her expert Thrive skills. I'm just trying to, 1 second. Okay, I think I'm ready to pass on to her. So you need to unmute yourself, Mrs. Simmons, and you have now got your screen, and you're you're live as well. Off you go.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. Hi everybody, I hope you're all okay, and thank you for joining us tonight. I hope if you've been here before that the sessions have been useful, and I hope if you're new that you find tonight's really useful as well. So thank you for coming. So what I'm going to talk to everybody about today is, I just clicked the PowerPoint and it didn't move. I'm gonna go for a second click. There we go. Is anxiety and managing anxiety. So we'll come on to that second. And I'm also going to talk about supporting children as the lockdown eases, because obviously that's the sort of situation that we're in now. I've got some activities and bits and pieces to show you throughout. I'm going to be talking about the different types of tantrums and how you can manage those using the VRFs. So some of it will be recap, and I'll go through that, and I'll try and use different examples. So if you were here before, then it's something new for you. And yeah, that's what we're going to do today. Oh, and I'll refer to the anxiety gremlin resource. So that's something that we have in school, and that's something that we might use alongside Thrive and the other resources that we use. So, before I start, I wanted to show you this. So last week we looked at some breathing activities. So we looked at the little windmills and the straws and things like that. This is really nice to use for a breathing activity. It's called a Hoberman's sphere. They're really cheap. They're just like plasticky ones, and you can get them sometimes in pound shops, I think. This one was from Amazon, and they're quite nice because they can show the breathing, which is sometimes quite difficult for children to imagine. So you can talk about breathing in and letting the air kind of fill your tummy, and then breathing out, and you can get children to show you their breathing with the sphere. So yeah, I was hoping to show you that one last week, but I forgot. So hopefully that was useful today. So thinking about supporting your children as lockdown eases, because I think it's been a while. We've got used to being at home more. We've got used to seeing fewer people, perhaps going out less. So there's some kind of practical ideas here that might be helpful. So I think recognising changes is really important, and talking about them honestly. So if you're feeling a bit worried about something, talking about it and acknowledging it, and thinking about ways that you can manage that together. So ways that you can do that: preparing for practical changes. So things like coming back to school, maybe you could look at the website, maybe you could get your uniform out and try it on, those kind of things. Talking about worries. So for example, if somebody is worried that they're going to be separated from their friends, maybe they're in another year group, and they're worried that they're not going to see them. So we can acknowledge that and talk about why that might be the case. So why people are being asked to stay apart where possible, so talking about keeping everybody safe and that being really important. I mean, you might like to do some of these things with drawing or writing, maybe creating a little timetable, something like that would be useful. And then the next part is planning for the new normal. So we all had to adjust to being in lockdown, and now it's adjusting again, coming back out of lockdown. So if you can involve your child where possible, that is really, really helpful. They'll have ownership over the kind of decisions, and it will help children to feel in control, give them some control of the situation. So that's not saying kind of let children be in charge, but maybe offering several options where you would be happy with all of the options, and then allowing the child to kind of say which they prefer, things like that. And I think being honest is really important. So, you know, if we're not going to be able to do things, saying we're not going to be able to do that, but explaining why. So if you're worried about maybe having more contact, how we could have more contact with friends and family while keeping a safe distance from them, you might be able to create, like, I know at the beginning of lockdown there are like elbow handshakes and things like that. Maybe we could do a distance hug, or like a special greeting ritual, something like that. So something that's making it fun and kind of keeping everybody safe. Oh, now I'm not sure if this is going to work. It looks like it might. This is a little video link, and I thought this is a really nice video to share. I'll see if it works, and if it doesn't, I'll explain what it is. Maybe we'll be lucky. Or maybe not. Oh. I'll stop it. Well, I'm not having much luck with doing that either. Okay, so it's just a really short video, and it is a little animation about a hedgehog and a tortoise, and they're friends, and they can't give each other a hug, and they really want to. So the tortoise paints a picture for the hedgehog, and the hedgehog does a silly dance for the tortoise. It's really nice. It's just a really short video. Maybe I can share the link with you somehow. But yeah, sorry, I was going to give it a go, but we haven't been successful with that one today.
When we upload our video, the video of this, to probably try and do that by the beginning of next week at the latest, on Facebook and those sorts of things, we'll add it to the comment section underneath that video.
Oh, perfect. That would be great. So the next one is being open about worries, with giving opportunities to ask questions and discuss. And I think kind of opportunities that come up in day-to-day life are really helpful, because they might feel less intense. So maybe if you're in the car driving somewhere, that's actually a really good one, because you don't have the eye contact, so that's sometimes easier. Or you know, when you're doing when you're eating dinner or something like that. There's a picture here, I think it's on the left of your screen, and this is a worry monster, and you can buy these, and that you would write your worries on a piece of paper and then fold it up and put it inside the worry monster, and that is sometimes a nice way for children to kind of process their worries and then show that they're kind of putting them to one side. When children are talking about their worries, it's important to acknowledge that that is a worry for them and normalise the concerns. So saying something, I think there were some examples last week on those little clips, so saying something like, oh, I'd imagine lots of people would be worried that they won't see their friends, or many people are worried about the germs and wondering if they're washing their hands enough. That's really normal. And I think if children know that you're there and that you are going to listen, then that will help them to be really open about any worries. This middle picture on your screen is a page from like a little journal. I think it's this one is from the Happy Self journal, I think, and it's where children can write things down. So maybe not for everybody, but a really nice one if your child would like to do something like this. So it's kind of acknowledging positives in the day. There's a little space here to write your own affirmation, and you don't need to have a special journal or anything like that to do this. You could do it in a notebook or on a piece of paper. So sometimes something like that is really nice. And there are lots of stories as well. So this is a picture of a story that we've read recently as one of our assemblies, Ruby's Worry. But there are lots of stories about worries and concerns. So sometimes reading those together might be a nice thing to do. The next thing is to look after yourself. So as you can see, the image says you can't pour from an empty cup, take care of yourself first. So that's really important too. When you're looking after everybody else and you're looking after, you know, your family, and you've got lots of things going on, that one's really important too.
Mrs. Simmons?
Yes.
Can you just remind people what VRFs are, please?
Oh yeah, so it's like the little process that you would go through if you have noticed that somebody is not feeling quite themselves. So you would validate what they're feeling. So it might be as part of a meltdown, or it could be you've noticed somebody's really withdrawn or taken themselves away, quite sad. So validate and then contain. So making the situation feel manageable, offering it back. I've noticed that your head is down and you're looking really sad. I'm wondering if you're feeling worried because everybody has rushed outside to play and they've left you behind. Or we missed out at the beginning, the attune. So the attune part is where you kind of match the emotion. So if somebody is really angry, you would probably go in with like a firmer tone, maybe a bit louder, not shouting, but you're trying to kind of match the tone, and you would match the facial expression and things like that. And then the last one is regulate, where you're helping to offer a solution, come to a solution together that would work this time, and then that's helping to build the new pathways in the brain for the future. So when you're feeling worried, when you get that funny feeling in your tummy, perhaps you could show me this picture and I'll know that you're feeling worried and I can come and sit next to you. Or perhaps you could let me know that you're feeling worried by coming over to me and telling me. So kind of different options, and you would offer them not as a question, as a statement, but you're deciding together. So that was the VRFs. We're going to do a little bit more about those in a minute. Was there any other questions?
Yeah, there was another question, but I might leave this. It's a question that's not directly linked to this. I might do it at the end, in your Q&A at the end. Yeah,
perfect. So this part here about how you are helping a child to manage coming out of lockdown and reflecting on the things that you've done together during lockdown. So, you might draw a little timeline or something like that, or you might just look at pictures or remember some of the really great things that you've done, really nice outings or really nice activities, things that you've done together. Or, do you remember when we watched that lovely film and we sat together? And also the tricky times as well, or so you would acknowledge those too. Maybe it has been a really tricky time because it's been really hard only being able to go to the same places that are close to your house, and you've really missed going to a particular place that you would like going to. So talking about those things and then thinking about what you're looking forward to in the future. So is there somewhere you're looking forward to going, or people you're looking forward to seeing? So I think the reflecting part is really important because it helps you to remember the good parts as well as any tricky parts, and then looking forward is helps with kind of being hopeful, I suppose, and then managing expectations within that. So, you know, I'd really like to go on holiday for a really long time, really far away. That's probably not going to happen right now. So that would be really exciting in a really long time, but maybe before that we could do this instead. So kind of looking back, looking forward, but keeping realistic at the same time. Okay, so the VRFs and shining a light. So we've talked a little bit about these already. So we've got the attune, and you can see in the picture there, they're matching each other's facial expressions. Contain, which is about making the situation safe. So it can be taking the child away, or away from a tricky situation, or into a safe space, but it could just be sitting alongside the child. It doesn't have to be kind of like a physical containment. Validation, and we've talked about this in the past few sessions. So when you're validating the feeling that the child is having at that time, but not the behaviour. And so it says here, stop the behaviour, validate the feeling. So you might say something like, you must be feeling really cross because you've thrown your books on the floor. Pick them up and put them on the table. So you're saying what you expect, but you're also acknowledging the feeling as well. It might not be the right time to ask to pick them up and put them on the table. That could come later as part of the regulate. So at that point, you're really focusing on validating the behaviour. And then the regulate stage is helping a child to have options and solutions to resolving the situation, and with repeated experiences of that with a trusted adult, then the child will start to develop their own self-management, stress management strategies. So children have to have experience of stressful situations being managed for them by an adult before they can do it for themselves, and repeated experiences. And then we've got the triune brain again, because if you are dysregulated, you would be acting from your reptilian brain. Got our little crocodile, and because your amygdala, which is in your limbic system, your mammalian brain, will have sent a signal saying there's a danger. And we talked a bit about this last time, what different people might perceive as a danger. And I think one of the examples we used was like a man in a red jumper. So if somebody had had a previous negative experience with a man in a red jumper, then seeing a red jumper again might be a trigger for this is a stressful situation, even though in this context it's not a threatening situation, it's not a stressful situation. So the amygdala would send out a chemical alert to the body, and it would knock out all of the other functions of the limbic system. So it would knock out things like seeking, playing, and you would be left with the fight, flight, or freeze response. So if a child's in that kind of distressed state, then any sort of rationing, reasoning, things which you would do with your cognitive brain, it's not the right time to do those things. So that would come later, and you would always return to the behaviour afterwards, and that would be shining the light, and we're going to talk about that next. So when you're using the VRFs, you're observing the behaviour, noticing what's happening, thinking about what the emotion might be that's being expressed by the behaviour, using the VRF, so you're putting language to the experience. And in the handout that we looked at last time, we talked about situations where less language would be helpful. So if somebody was very outwardly dysregulated, so angry, kicking, shouting, biting, when somebody is in a slightly calmer state, focusing, wondering how they're feeling. So that's really important because you're putting language to the feelings and linking it to maybe body sensations. Or I'm wondering if you're really angry, I've noticed your face is really red and you've clenched your fist. So making those links and then finding a new way of managing. And then the last part is the shining the light. So that's the part where you return to the situation. So, you know, somebody's thrown everything on the floor because they're feeling really cross, and you're saying that you've noticed that happening, that's not acceptable behaviour, and this is what we're going to do to repair it. And because it's later, because it's when you know, the child has calmed down, the big feelings have been worked through alongside an adult, their thinking brain is back online, then they'll be much more able over time with repeated experiences to be able to kind of accept and make the links between, if I do this, this is likely to happen. So it says here, taking children out of survival mode, the fight, flight, freeze, so that they can focus. Not distraction, denial, reassuring or ignoring. Distraction is when you would maybe say, oh, well, we don't need to worry about that now, we're doing this instead. So don't worry that you've you know, don't worry that that person has said something unkind to you. It doesn't really matter. We're going to be doing this instead. Or denial. Or I'm sure that didn't really happen. Let's just focus on what we're doing. The reassuring, I don't think it means not kind of comforting the child, but I think it means not sort of saying, oh, it's all going to be okay, you don't need to worry. It's I think through wondering it in and through questioning about how a child is feeling, I think that in itself is quite reassuring, but it is avoiding the kind of generalized everything's going to be okay kind of situation, or just ignoring, which can sometimes seem like a good option because it might just pass. So those kind of strategies might work temporarily, might work on one occasion, maybe two, but I think Thrive talks about how that's not underlying the cause of the behaviour, so it's not addressing the emotions which are causing the behaviour, and it's not helping the child to develop their own more appropriate stress management system, a stress management system that is going to be less distressing for the child. So Thrive talk about how children are able to let go of a distress feeling much more easily once they know a trusted adult has recognised and acknowledged it. Mr. Beamer, did we have any questions at the moment about any of those things? Because we've talked about quite a lot there.
No, not yet. We've got this. There is a question, a really interesting one, but like I said, I'm going to leave that one to the end. But if you keep going for now, that's great.
Yeah. So we've got an example here for shining the light. So if we imagine that there's a boy and he'd like to play with the other children at playtime. So to get their attention, he throws things at them and tries to jump on their backs to join in the game. And that doesn't work. People don't want to play with him when he's doing that. So you would notice what's happening and describe that. So wow, you must want to play with those other children so much, you know, you're jumping on top of them because you really want to play with those other children. And then I've noticed you know, you haven't been able to play with them today, and they haven't wanted to play with you when you've done that. And you would want to make sure that the child is not, you know, not near other children. You're trying to avoid any sort of shame or embarrassment. So that would be the containing part, sort of moving them away, or you know, taking them inside, or perhaps asking the other children to leave. So validating the feelings, talking about perhaps how the child is feeling really lonely, you know, they're really desperate to want to play, so desperate that they're trying to catch children's attention by kind of physically throwing things, jumping on top of them, and describing that, and then putting language to the experience. So I'm wondering if you're feeling really, I don't know, I wonder if you're feeling like really excited in your tummy, like you really just want to play with the other children. Perhaps when we would like to join in with the game, we could, and then offer some examples. So it might be, you know, you are offering them, we could ask somebody if we could play their game, or we could suggest what game we might like to play, and then afterwards explaining it's not okay to jump on other people's backs because other people don't like that, it might hurt them, and you know, we would like to work with the other children and play together, because it's not nice feeling lonely, it's not nice feeling left out. And then I've put here at the bottom some of the key, I think, keeping in mind, like Dan Hughes, his idea of place, the kind of attitude to adopt, some of the key characteristics, I suppose. So patient, consistent, so consistent over time. You know, you're consistently there, you're consistently listening. And I think, you know, doing it once, that doesn't mean going through this once with this particular child doesn't mean that they won't do that again the next day or another day. But I think the idea of repetition and going through that is really important, because you're you know, building the pathways in the brain through the repeated positive experiences. So you're helping to strengthen them through the repetition. So practice frequently, that's what that means. Privately, so not shaming, so not in front of other children. We're not trying to make the child feel embarrassed, but we do want them to know we've noticed, we know how we've imagined into how they're feeling, we have explained what's not okay about what's happened, and then we've offered some alternative ways of managing that. So maybe one would be, you know, perhaps at the beginning of playtime I could come out with you and we could, you know, we could go over to the game together if it's the beginning part of the game that's always really tricky, or something like that. So I think we looked at this slide last time, I'm not quite sure, but there are different ways of expressing emotional stress. And we quite often think of the acting out ways, so like aggression or agitation or those kind of ways, but there's also the possibly less noticed ways, so over adapting, being really keen to please the child who's not doing anything, or a child who is presenting their stress as a physical symptom, maybe a tummy ache, maybe a headache, or feeling powerless. So incapacitation is the one feeling deprived of strength, and the somatizing one is linking it to a physical symptom. So this part leads us on to tantrums. And Thrive talk about 2 different types of tantrums. So a wet tantrum and then a little Nero, or sometimes called a dry tantrum. And I'll talk about both of those. So the definition of a tantrum is an uncontrolled outburst of anger and frustration, typically in a young child. And we can maybe see one happening in this picture. And it's often associated with a child wanting to get their own way. But Thrive talk about how a tantrum can be related to a child needing the adult to be in charge and make a situation manageable. So it's not a situation that the child is able to manage on their own. So the first kind of tantrum, I can't find the little mouse to move the page on. Okay, is your kind of typical toddler tantrum, I suppose. So the child would maybe be in floods of tears, hot, sweaty, perhaps laying on the floor, kicking, screaming, those kind of things. And that's because the child's not yet developed their own stress management systems and their own ways of managing a stressful situation. So Thrive talk about using the VRFs, and they come up a lot. The VRFs and Shining a Light are 2 of the kind of key principles of Thrive. So in a tantrum situation, coming down to the child's level, holding them, being gentle but also being firm as well, and doing some deep breathing alongside them, speaking slowly, lowering your voice. So everything to help to calm the situation and help a child to feel that the adult, the adult is lending their thinking brain. The adult is in control of the situation and is going to help make it manageable for the child. And then that's helping the child to develop their own stress management systems. So it says here, developing the child's capacity to manage strong emotions through attention, noticing, voice level, tone, volume, and being present. So not leaving the child, letting them know that you're there alongside them. And then later, obviously, you would return to it and say, this, it's really important that we don't lay on the floor when we're in the supermarket, because other people are coming past with their trolleys and they might squash you. And Thrive also talk about how it can feel really embarrassing or overwhelming when it's in a public place, but it's still the same, because you're helping to develop the child's capacity, so you deal with it in the same way. But if you were in a very public space, you might try to move to somewhere more private for the same reason, to do with shame and embarrassment. So kind of very similar to the VRFs that we've looked at for other situations. And then the other type of tantrum, here we go, is they're sometimes called like the little Nero tantrum. So this one is where perhaps there is lots of noise and there's lots of perceived distress, but the child is actually in control of what's happening. So there possibly wouldn't be tears. These ones usually are when a child is frustrated that they're not getting their own way, and it might be because the adults consistently said no, or consistently, held firm with the boundaries. We are going to do this, we are going to put our shoes on before we go outside, we are going to tidy our room, whatever it is. And these kind of tantrums come developmentally between 18 months and 3 to 4 years, because at that stage of child development, the child goes through the stage where they, for themselves, they are the center of the universe, and that's really, really normal. So like a child, I think there's a special word for it, I can't remember at the moment, like a child-centered view. So you as the child can't think kind of beyond your own experiences, like you're the most important person. And then as children get older and move through different developmental stages, they start to realize that that's not necessarily true. So consistency is really important, and it's sometimes really hard because there might be negotiating, I'll stop if you, and it's really important that you stick with what you've said. So as an example here, it's not okay, I need you to stop whatever the child is doing. I will not change my mind. It is hard when we can't have what we want. It is disappointing. So you're still acknowledging that it's a difficult feeling for the child to be going through, but it's not going to change. So there's less kind of getting to the level of the child and matching or soothing in that way. It's supporting the child through more containing through what you're saying. So I'm not changing my mind, and it is hard, but that's what it is. The one thing to kind of watch out for is if this goes on for a little while, a child then can tip into proper distress. That's not really the right way of describing it, but more distress that's less controlled. So it can kind of tip into a wet tantrum, and at that point you'd need to change the approach to kind of matching, getting down to their level, maybe holding them firmly, holding them gently, and lowering your voice, slowing things down, and encouraging them to breathe deeply. So it's the two different types of tantrums, but this one can tip into the other type of tantrum. Were there any questions there, Mr. Beeman?
Not any questions, but there's been a few comments that said that was really interesting. And I agree entirely. I was fascinated by the two types of tantrums and how they can move from one to the other. So lots of people have said that. So, and I do agree. I think that was brilliant. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, I think this is really interesting too. And the idea of wanting to be in charge and how you might try and achieve that. Yeah, I think it is very interesting. So
I've got one question that's just
okay,
which is relevant. And sorry, I've got to just jump in front of the picture now. One sec. Got a notification blocking it. Okay. Is a tantrum the same as being stubborn with older children? Is that type of tantrum?
That's a really good question. Might have a think about that one and then come back to that one a bit later.
Shall I ask you again at the end?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Okay, cool.
Is a tantrum the same as being stubborn? Yeah, I'm gonna have a little think about that one.
Right.
So going to move on at the moment to the anxiety gremlin. So the anxiety gremlin, as the title suggests, is for anybody who might be feeling anxious. So there are two books, we've got them here. This one is, it says it's for aged 5 to 9, and then this one is for older children. It says here people aged 10 plus, and in the front it gives a little like little speech bubbles here, and it says, do you avoid situations that you feel anxious about? Do you often worry about worst case scenarios? Do you worry about bad things happening when you're anxious? Do you have no control over how you act when you're anxious? Do you worry a lot? If you've answered yes to any of these, then this is the book for you. So that's the 10 plus one, and I think this one has something similar. Yeah, so this one you can see it's aimed at younger children, but this one says this book is here to help if you often feel worried or afraid. You avoid, hide or escape from people, places or situations because of your worries. You often think worried thoughts. You don't want to be apart from your parents because of your worries. And there's more. So they set out at the beginning of the book who it might be useful for. And then it is like an activity book. for a child to work through with a trusted adult. So you can see there's like spaces to fill in for different activities. And I think these are really good because they use a CBT technique. So CBT is cognitive behavioural therapy, and they help to kind of teach, I suppose, that it's not the thing that you're worried about that's causing the feeling, it's how you're thinking about the thing. And so you are in control of how you think about it, and then you can choose how you think about it, and then that will affect how you feel about it. So that is a really condensed and brief summary of the kind of CBT approach. I am going to talk about it a little bit more on the next slide. And then this one, the older one, looks at the different ways that anxiety, I think it was this one, yeah, looks at the different ways that anxiety can present itself. So panic attacks or phobias or separation anxiety. It sounds like they're quite intense. I don't think they are perhaps as intense as they sound. I think, and obviously you don't have to do the whole thing. You can pick and choose which parts are relevant for you. But yeah, we've got copies of these in school, and if you wanted to have a look at them, I'm sure we could arrange that so you could have a look, and then see if that was something you thought would be useful. So this is like the CBT cycle, I suppose, but this has been adapted for the anxiety gremlin. So you've got the trigger at the top, and that could be different for anybody. So it could be something like I worry about going into busy places, or I don't want to go to my swimming lesson because I'm worried that, you know, it'll be really embarrassing if I can't do it, or you know, anything. And then this kind of, sometimes it's drawn as a circle, but the kind of like diamond underneath is showing that your thoughts and what you then choose to do and how you choose to feel about it. And obviously it's not a conscious choice, but your thoughts are affecting how you are feeling, are all working together to make you to contribute to you feeling anxious. And so the situation is only the trigger, and you have the choice in how you would react. And it kind of talks through strategies in the book, so how you would choose to think differently, because obviously that looks very the way that's written, it makes it sound very easy, doesn't it? Or you just choose to think differently. But it obviously gives you examples about how you would do that, and helps to give the sense of control, that it's not the anxiety in control of you, you're in control of the anxiety, because you're in control of your reactions to situations. And again, like kind of training your thoughts. So yes, we've got the two different types here, with different activities inside. Were there any questions about that at all?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, so then I've just got some activities here. Some of them are like anxiety linked, and then some of them are more general activities, which I just thought were really nice. So worry people, worry dolls. So you can make your own, or I think you can buy them online as well, and you can make them with like pegs and bits of fabric, plasticine, those kind of things. And it's a little bit like the worry monster. So you tell the doll your worry, and then you put it under your pillow, and then the doll is going to take care of the worries. So in the same way that you're kind of feeding the worry to the toy monster with the zip, you're kind of unburdening yourself of your worry. And then it says here, when you're sleeping, your brains are obviously doing a lot of repair work through the night, and making sense of things. So I think that is the idea why you might want to put it under your pillow, but obviously you don't have to, you could put it somewhere else. So there's that one, which I thought was quite nice. These ones are great. The Wildlife Trust, they have loads of different activities, and they're all these lovely little sheets. So there's like the wildlife yoga here, and making a little hedgehog house. And then on the next page, your own bird feeder, how to make your own compost. They're not all making ones. There's activity ones, there's lots of different ones actually. When I was on there and having a look, there was quite a long list, so I thought these are really nice, and nice things to do together in a little group, or you know, just yourself and your child. So I thought those were great. And then this next one, so this is from Action for Happiness, and they are doing, I think they're doing it every month. They certainly did it last month. So we've got the Jump Back July calendar, and it just gives you a little thought for each day. So help someone in need and notice how that gives you a boost, or ask yourself what's the best thing that can happen. So, you know, something like this might be nice to look at together, or it might just be nice to dip in and out of. It's online. I think it was at Action for Happiness, and you can just download it, and it was free. So I thought that one was quite nice. And that was all I had to share today. So the question was, is stubbornness the same as the little Nero tantrum? I think I would
stubbornness in older children. It was. Is that?
Yeah,
older children?
I think I would probably lean towards yes, because it's about trying to get control and trying to get control of your situation and trying to get your own way. I think I'd probably want to know a little bit more about this situation, and was it stubborn about specific things, or was it just about all kinds of things? And I suppose if it was about specific things, then maybe you would want to have a look and see, was there kind of a compromise way that you could do those specific things so that it was meeting your own criteria but also feeling manageable for the child. But I suppose if it was about things more broadly, things more generally, then you'd probably want to be kind of unpicking that a bit more, and using the VRFs, noticing it's really hard for you to follow an instruction, or noticing it's really hard for you to say yes, or to agree, and kind of working through that way, perhaps.
Great.
Hopefully that's helpful.
That's brilliant. I've got two questions. Actually, it's getting a really interactive session because I've got a recommendation for a book from one family. So I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's a great book, and it's called Anger Management Workbook for Kids by Samantha Snowden. And and one of our families have found that very useful. So they're doing it as a recommendation for people watching, and maybe something that you might want to read as well. So that's
great. No, I've not read that one.
There's Anger Management Workbook for Kids by Samantha Snowden. So that's one to note down. And then I've got a question as well, which I think is a question that lots of people can relate to. So I'll read it out. I won't say who it is, obviously, but I'll read it out. And it says, my relationship with my eldest child has been seriously affected by trying to homeschool him. He finds homeschooling very stressful and finds it impossible to concentrate and do the work at home. My youngest child is easy to homeschool and doesn't get stressed by it, and our relationship is as good as ever. Do you have any advice about how to mend this relationship and move back to just being my mum role?
Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? It's really hard because you've kind of crossed into a different role, and I think it's really hard when you are trying to, I'm just thinking back to my own driving lessons with my dad, and I think it's really hard to take kind of lesson instructions from your family in the same way that you would from somebody who is outside of your family. So I think, you know, I can definitely relate to that, and relate to how tricky it is to be in that changing role of, you know, usually you're doing mum things together and now you're doing kind of schooling things together as well, and that's really tricky. I wonder if you could perhaps put less pressure on yourselves to do some of the home learning, or you could perhaps timetable it out together so that you are doing a little bit of home learning and then some things that, you know, your eldest child would really like to do with you, and do them together. Or perhaps you could try and encourage some independent learning from your eldest child. So perhaps maybe something that they would find manageable by themselves, that they could have success with, but could do more independently, maybe something more like projecty research based, so that then your role would be just kind of, you know, checking it's going okay, and, you know, offering those positive comments. So I don't know if any of those things might help.
Thank you. I've had the same kind of experiences as well, and actually I think the timetable thing that you mentioned is quite important. You know, making time to do the kind of the family things alongside doing some kind of traditional homeschooling kind of things as well.
Yeah, and you could maybe put it together put the timetable together as a pair. So you could perhaps decide that you're going to do a tiny bit of home learning each day, or maybe you're going to have a whole day where you don't do any, or maybe there's a particular time of day that it would be better to do a little bit. But I think
Great. I've got another reflection on the anxiety gremlins, actually. I think it's worth sharing. It says, I've worked through the anxiety gremlin. I've found that even the simplest task in the book, like the colouring in, help, as it provides a clear and ring-fenced time, one-to-one, which in itself helps massively with an anxious child. And I would thoroughly recommend it. So that's someone who I think was listening to the first question and has dropped in something that's helped them at home, which is wonderful that people are sharing.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really good to hear. And I think it's really nice, you know, I think what you said about doing activities, just activities together and having time together, that in itself is you know, is really important and really special as well.
Great. Okay. Just having a quick scan. There is, I don't know if you, there's a September related question that I'm gonna answer in a second, because I think it's in, you know, lots of people might want to hear it. But I suppose before we move on, do you want to say what the plan is for, because it's a bit different next week, isn't it? So yeah.
Okay, so next week is just more of a kind of question session, really. So I won't be kind of sharing anything new, but what we thought we might do is go through some of the frequently asked questions. So I have put together some slides with some of the questions that people have been asking as we go through, and I can go through some of those things. But also, if there are any questions that you would really like me to answer or try and answer, if you're able to kind of drop them in the comments maybe now, or send an email over the next few days, and then we can try and include those as well. And then obviously going through those things, I don't think that would last a whole hour, so there would be plenty of time if you wanted to ask questions on the day as well, and we can just kind of focus on whatever people would prefer to. So if people had lots of questions and would prefer to kind of ask them, and we can do a question and answer rather than looking at slides and things like that, then that is perfect. And if people would like to look back through some of the slides or some of the activities, we can do that too.
Wonderful. I have one more book recommendation as well. It's what to do when your temper flares, a kid's guide to overcoming problems with anger. And it's by Dawn Huburn, I think. You'll have it in your log as well, so we can share those if you want to. We can put them on the screen, maybe these recommendations. So maybe next week we could have a little, if anyone else has got some books or materials that might help, if you drop them into this chat before it ends, maybe we can put it on one of the slides next week, just a list of the ones that have been recommended, and people could take a screen grab.
Definitely.
And if they want to get them off Amazon,
great
local bookshops, wherever, they can do that. That's I think I've scanned all the questions for now. So I'm going to flick myself onto screen so you can wave goodbye, Mrs. Simmons. I'm not going to mute you yet. So I'm on screen. Great. So thanks, guys. It's been wonderful. And I think, thank you, Mrs. Simmons. That was really interesting. I found it fascinating, some of the stuff you shared. I could really relate to it with some of the experiences I've had with my kids at home. A couple of things to kind of say. I had just one person asked me about this, but I thought I'd just share it. They asked about when am I going to be sending out more information about September. And I sent an email earlier this week, but just to kind of remind people, I'm in a process now of going through the new risk assessment, because that's what it needs to change in line with the new government guidance for September. That's going to be shared with staff as of beginning of next week, but I will write to families as early into next week as possible, depending how quickly we get through the risk assessment. That will give you guys an idea of what September will look like. We are, like I said in my email, going to bring everyone back in September. That's what the guidance allows us to do, which is fantastic. But there's going to be little tweaks to how the day starts and those sorts of things, but they're going to be minor, hopefully. So that's going to come out next week. Also, the risk assessment itself will be published on our school website, so you can dig down into the detail if you wish to. It'll be there for you, but I'll in my letter I'll explain where that will go, and that will be online by the end of next week, but the letter will come before that. We're getting a bit jazzy at these live sessions, so I had really great fun last week at doing a live assembly, and I'm going to do another one tomorrow morning. This afternoon I dropped the link on every Teams group, year group, Teams group, that you can click. If you're at home and your children are at home, if you click that link, you can be part of that assembly, similar to this kind of setup where your children will be able to write in the bar and contribute to the discussion in the assembly. And also the children in school, we might be able to get some of those live on screen to contribute and stuff like we did last time. The video of my last live assembly is on our Facebook page for you to watch. And if it clashes, and it will clash with some children's live stream lessons tomorrow, because we can't avoid that because they go on all day, but I've done it in a different time, so it shouldn't be the same group as last time it clashes with. Please don't miss live lessons with your teachers or small group reading with TAs or anything like that on Teams for the assembly. I will record the assembly. Hopefully it'll work successfully, and I'll upload it so children that missed it will be able to watch it later that day. So that's my two messages, I think. What we'll do is we do what we do every week. We'll leave the session going live for about 10 minutes. You won't be able to see us and the screen will go blank, but you'll be able to add comments and questions and stuff that maybe you want Mrs. Simmons to pick up next week for the last session before we go break for the summer. If you put them in the comments, we download the log and we take that away, and Mrs. Simmons can see the questions that I've already seen and the responses that I've typed and those sorts of things, but also anything you leave in the next 10 minutes we'll get as well. So thanks, guys.
Thank you for your questions. It's really nice. It makes it feel much more interactive than just talking to my computer.
There's definitely lots of people there, and I'm getting lots of messages, lots of questions and comments, and there's some lovely ones, some ones of thanks as well that you'll be able to read, Mrs. Simmons, because I know you put a lot of effort into this. You'll be able to read them after when you download the log. So I won't read them all out, but there's some lovely ones in there. And lots more book recommendations coming in. 1, 2, about 4 or 5 more. 4 or 5 more book recommendations, so keep those coming, please, and we'll add them. We'll definitely do a slide. Mrs. Simmons, make a note. We'll definitely do a slide next week with a list of the ones that our community have recommended for some of the stuff we're doing. Okay?
Perfect.
So have a lovely evening, everyone. You're now on screen again, Mrs. Simmons. You might not have realised.
Sat here playing with my Hoberman spear.
I dropped you back on screen as a small surprise. So So if you want to, if you just wave.
I'll wave. Thank
You're
you. Bye.
Bye.